It was, yeah. There were protests that went on, demonstrations involving several hundred people marching through the streets of uptown Charlotte, marching to the courthouse, then over to the police station, and then sort of dispersing. There was the specter of about 400 National Guard troops standing guard at many of those government buildings with their camouflage Hum vehicles there with them. At midnight, a curfew went into effect, the mayor having imposed it earlier in the evening. And from midnight till 6 this morning, the streets were supposed to be cleared. There were still some stragglers out in the street. The police said, though, that as long as they kept it peaceful, they weren't going to necessarily enforce that curfew, McGraw.
Yeah, the National Guard was there. It was almost, I saw a lot of fist pumping, a lot of hugging of police officers. I know there was a lot of angst and a lot of protests, but it seemed like that the two sides got along in a sense.
Right, yeah, and often that's where you see the friction develop. You saw it develop out in Ferguson, and you saw it develop in Baltimore, that friction between protesters and the police, it sort of ramps up, and at some point somebody throws a water bottle or something happens to set off the crowd and the police, and that's where it all goes wrong. We didn't see that happen last night. The police were showing rather remarkable restraint. A couple of officers were treated after they were sprayed with some sort of chemical by demonstrators. They were treated there at the scene and put back into service. They didn't even have to go home. But other than that, it was quite peaceful last night, McGraw.
Let's talk about this video. The family has seen the video. Do we still have any more conclusive evidence that there was or wasn't a gun in this shooting?
Not really. The family and a lot of the demonstrators last night were calling for a wider release of that video. They'd like to see it made public altogether. The chief has given no indication that he intends to do that. He's sort of handing this whole thing off to state investigators. It may be their responsibility to decide whether, in fact, it is released publicly. The family says that it's not as clear-cut as the chief seemed to indicate that it was, that they see a man, Keith Scott, walking backward with his hands down at his sides, with his arms down his sides. You really can't tell if, in fact, he's holding anything in front of him. The police have said that he was holding a gun. The family has said previously that it was a book that he was holding. You've seen probably some shots, some screenshots of a gun lying there at the scene after the shooting. And so, I mean, it still, at least as far as the family is concerned, doesn't answer a lot of the questions that they had going in.
Yeah. Jim Ryan, ABC News correspondent. Any chance of these protests going to continue throughout the weekend?
Probably will, But I mean, there's a big distinction between a protest going on, a demonstration, even one that involves several hundred people, and the sort of mayhem that you saw on Wednesday night, with people shattering windows and spray painting stuff, and looting buildings. We didn't see any of that last night. So I suspect that the demonstrations will continue. Certainly city leaders here hope that it doesn't turn into the scene that we saw on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Jim Ryan, ABC News correspondent. Thanks, Jim. Good stuff.